Book 3, Chapter 79, continuing with verse 31. Tell me, O king, on what solid foundation does the great Mount Meru stand like a tender filament of the lotus? What gigantic form contains thousands of Meru and Mandara mountains within its spacious wall? Tell me what immeasurable consciousness has spread myriads of intelligences in all these worlds. Tell me what supplies your strength for ruling and protecting your people and in conducting yourself through life. In whose sight do you either lose yourself or think to exist? Tell me all these, O clear-sighted and fair-faced king, for the satisfaction of my heart. Let your answer melt down the doubt that has covered the face of my heart as with snow. If it fails to completely efface this dirt of doubt from the surface of my heart, I will never account it as the saying of the wise. But if you fail to lighten my heart of its doubts and set it at ease, then know for certain that you shall immediately be made fuel to the fire of my bowels. I shall fill this big belly of mine with all the people of your realm. But should you answer rightly, you shall reign in peace. Otherwise, you shall meet your end like the ignorant who are satisfied with the enjoyments of life. Who ceased speaking. Saying so, the nocturnal fiend made a loud shout, like a roaring cloud, to express her joy. Then she sat silently with her fearful features, like a light-hearted cloud in autumn. Chapter 80, The Minister's Answers. Vashishta continued. After the giant like descendant of Rakshasas had asked her occult questions in the deep gloom of night in that thick forest, the good and great minister began to give his replies. The minister said, "Hear me, you dark and cloud-like form. Unravel your riddling questions with as much ease as a lion foils the fury of gigantic elephants. All your questions relate to the Supreme Spirit and are framed in enigmatic language to test the force of our penetration into their hidden meanings. The soul is identical to consciousness, which is more minute than a particle of air. That is the atomic principle that you asked about, because it is a nameless atom, imperceptible by the 6 organs of sense and unintelligible to the mind. Underlying the atomic consciousness is the minute seed that contains the universe. Whether it is a substantial or unsubstantial reality, nobody can say. It is called a reality from our notion of it being the soul of all by itself. It is from that soul that all other existences have come into being. It is a void from its outward emptiness, but it is no void as regards the consciousness, which is a reality. Because it cannot be perceived, it is said to be nothing. But because it is imperishable, it is a subtle something. It is not a nothing because it permeates all things. All things are only reflections of the minute consciousness, and its unity shines forth in plurality, all which is as unreal as the form of a bracelet made of gold substance. This atom is the transcendental vacuum. It is imperceptible owing to its minuteness, though it is situated in all things. It is unperceived by the mind and external senses. Its universal permeation cannot make it nothing, because all that exists is not that, which alone is known as the thinking principle that makes us speak, see, and act. No kind of reasoning can establish the non-entity of real existence. Because it is not capable of being seen by anybody. Yet, the universal soul is known in its hidden form, like the unseen camphor by its smell. The unlimited soul resides in all limited bodies, and the atomic consciousness pervades the vast universe in the same manner as the mind fills all bodies in its purely subtle state, unknown to the senses. It is one and all, unity as well as plurality, because it is the soul of each and all, both singly as well as collectively, and because it supports and contains each and all by and within itself. All these worlds are like little billows in the vast ocean of divine consciousness, whose intelligence, like a liquid body, shows itself in the form of eddies in the water. This minute intellect being imperceptible to the senses and the mind, is said to be of the form of emptiness. But being perceived by our consciousness, it is not a nothing, although the nature of a void in itself. I am that, and so are you, by our conviction of the unity. But if we only believe ourselves to be composed of our bodies, then I am not that, nor you are he. If we rid our sense of I and you through our knowledge of truth, we cease to be the ego, and you and all other persons lose all their properties in the soul unity. This particle of consciousness is immovable, though it moves over thousands of miles. We find that in our consciousness, this particle has many a mile composed in it. The mind is firmly seated in the empty intellect from which it never stirs. Though it goes to all places where it is never located. That which has its seat in the body can never go out of it, just like a baby hanging on the breast of its mother cannot look to another place for its rest. One who is free to range over large tracts will never leave its own home, where it has the liberty and power to do all he likes. Wherever the mind may wander, it is never affected by the climate of that place. Just like a jar taken to a distant country with its lid shut, does not yield any passage to the light and air of that region into it. The thinking and non-thinking consciousness, both being perceived in our minds, is said to be the exercise of intellect and the dullness of the intellect. When our exercise of intellect is assimilated into the solid substance of divine consciousness, then our intellect is said to be solidified as a stone. The consciousness of the Supreme Being has spread worlds in the infinite space that are most wonderful, as they are his uncreated creations. The divine soul is of the essence of fire and never forsakes its form of fire. It inheres in all bodies without burning them, and it is the enlightener and purifier of all substances. The blazing intelligence of the divine soul, purer than the ethereal sphere, produces the elemental fire by its presence. The intellect, which is the light of the soul and the enlightener of the lights of the luminous sun, moon, and stars, is indestructible and never fades. Although the light of the luminaries is lost on the last day of universal doom, there is an inextinguishable light, glory, known as ineffably transcendental, which the eye cannot behold, but it is perceptible to the mind as its inner illumination and presents all things to its view. From there proceeds the intellectual light, which transcends the consciousness and mental lights and presents before it wonderful pictures of things invisible to visible light. Although plant life has no eyes, it is conscious of an inner light within that causes their growth and gives the capability of bearing fruits and flowers. With regard to time, space, and action, and existence of the world, all are only the perceptions of sense and have no master or maker, father or supporter, except the Supreme Soul in whom they exist. They are mere modifications of himself, and nothing of themselves. The atomic spirit is the casket of the bright gem of the world, without changing its minuteness. The divine spirit is its measure and measurer, beside which there is no separate world of itself. Spirit manifests itself in everything, in all these worlds. It shines as the brightest gem when all the worlds are compressed in it at the universal dissolution. Because his nature is beyond understanding, he is said to be a speck of obscurity. Because of the brightness of his intellect, he is said to be a ray of light. Because we are conscious of him, he is known to exist. Because our sight cannot see him, he is said to be non-existent. He is said to be far away because he is invisible to our eyes, and to be near because his being is the nature of our consciousness. He is described as a mountain because he is the totality of our consciousness, although he is more minute than any perceptible particle. His consciousness manifests itself in the form of the universe. Mountains are not real existence. They only exist like Meru in his atomic substratum. A twinkling is what appears as a short instant, and a kalpa epoch is the long duration of an age. Sometimes an instant, when it is filled with acts and thoughts of an age, represents a kalpa. Just like an extensive country of many miles can be pictured in miniature or in a grain of the brain. The course of a long kalpa is sometimes represented in the womb of an instant, just like the time to build a great city is present in the small space of a mind's memory, as it is in the reflection of a mirror. As little moments and calpal ages, high mountains and extensive mile, may abide in a single grain of the intellect, so do all dualities and pluralities unite and meet in the unity of God. That I have done this and that before is an impression derived from the thought of our actual actions and activity. But the truth thereof becomes as unreal as our doings in a dream. It is a calamity that prolongs the course of time, and our prosperity diminishes its duration. Just like the short space of a single night appears like 12 long years to King Harishchandra in his misery. Anything that appears as a certain truth to the mind stamps the impression in the soul. It is the same as the impression of a gold jewelry is deeper in the soul than the idea of its gold. There is nothing like a moment or an age or anything near or far to the soul. The opposites of light and darkness, nearness and distance, and a moment and an age are only varied impressions on the unvaried percipient mind. There is no real difference. All things or objects that are perceptible to the senses are called evident or apparent. That which lies beyond them is said to be imperceptible or unapparent. But visual sensation is not self-evident. Only the vision of consciousness, which is the great essence. As long as there is the knowledge of the jewel, there is the knowledge of the gem also. That of the real gem being lost under the apparent form by restoring attention away from the visible form of the jewel to its real essence, that one is led to the sight of the pure light of the only one Brahman. Brahma is viewed as reality, thought, when he is thought of as pervading all things. He is said to be unreal, asat, because he is not the object of vision. Consciousness is said to be a reality from its faulty exercise of intellect. Otherwise, it is a stoid or dull matter. Consciousness is the wonderful property of the divine spirit, in which it is present as its object, chaitya. But how can a man see consciousness if his mind is fixed to the sight of a world that is a shadow of consciousness and moves like a tree shaken by the wind. As a mirage is the reflection of the dense light of the sun, so the world is a shadow of the solid light of divine consciousness. That which is more refined than the rays of the sun and never decays is always as uniform as it was before creation and remains apart from it. Hence, its existence is equivalent to non-existence. Just like the accumulation of sunbeams exhibits the form of a gold mine in the sky, so the golden appearance of the world prevents the deluded from seeing the knowable object of the intellect. Like the appearance of a visionary city in a dream, the sight of this world is neither a reality nor altogether unreal. It is a reflection of consciousness, like the dream is a reflection of images in the memory. It is only a continued medley of errors. Knowing it as such, men should consider everything by the light of reason and proceed to the knowledge of truth by their intellectual culture. There is no difference between a house and a void, other than that the one is the object of vision and the other of consciousness. Again, all nature teeming with life is said to live in God, who is light and life of all forevermore. But all these living beings have no rooms in the empty sphere of divine consciousness. They live and shine like solar rays, proceeding imperceptibly from that luminous orb. A difference appears in these rays, both from the original light and from one another, by a curious design of providence. But it is the same in all, like the form of trees growing out of the same kind of seed. As the tree contains in the seed, it is of the same kind as the parent seed. So the innumerable worlds contained in the empty seed of Brahma are also as empty as Brahma himself. As the tree which is yet undeveloped in the seed does not exist without development of its parts, so the world in the womb of Brahma was discernible only to divine consciousness. There's only one God who is one and uncreated, calm and quiet, without beginning, middle, or end, and without a body and its part. He has no duality, and he is one in many. He is the form of pure light and shines forever, with everlasting and undiminished luster. The king's answers. The Rakshasi said, "Well said, O counselor. Your explanations are satisfying and filled with spiritual doctrine. Now let the king with lotus eyes answer the other questions." The king answered, "He whose belief consists in the renunciation of all reliance on this world, and whose attainment depends on forsaking all the desires of the heart, whose expansion and contraction causes the creation and extinction of the world, who is the object of the doctrines of Vedanta, and who is inexpressible by words or speech of humankind, who is between the two extremes of doubt, whether he is or is not, and who is between both extremes, that he is and is not, and whose pleasure will display the world with all its animate and inanimate being, whose universal permeation does not destroy his unity, who is the being of all, the being of soul of all is still but one, he alone, O lady, is truly said to be the eternal Brahman. The minute particle is falsely conceived as spirit air because it is invisible to the naked eye. But in truth, it is neither air nor any other thing except pure consciousness. This smallest of particles is said to be sound or words, but it is error to say so because it is far beyond the reach of sound or the sense of words. This particle is all yet nothing. It is neither I, you, or he. It is the Almighty Soul, and its power is the cause of all. It is the soul that is attainable with great pains, and which, being gained, adds nothing to our possession. But its attainment is attended with the gain of the Supreme Soul. There is no better gain. Ignorance of the soul stretches the bonds of our worldliness and repeated reincarnations, with their evils growing like the rankest weeds in spring, until they are rooted out by spiritual knowledge. Those who are in easy circumstances in life lose their souls by viewing themselves only as solid bodies that rise quickly to view like a dense mirage by the light of the sun. The particle of self-consciousness contains Mount Meru and the three worlds in itself, like bits of straw. They are distinguished from it in order to present their delusive appearance to us. Whatever is imprinted in consciousness appears expressed without it. The fond embrace of passionate lovers in dream and imagination serves to exemplify this truth. as consciousness rose of itself with its omnipotent will at the first creation of the world, so it exercises the same volition in its subsequent formations also, like sprigs growing from the joints of reeds and grass. The hobby that enters the heart also shows itself on the outside as an example of children's whims. The answer, or the question comes, what is Mount Meru? Well, that's very important. The particle of self-consciousness contains Mount Meru and the three worlds in itself, like bits of straw. Mount Meru is the Sri Chakra. And the Sri Chakra is the energy pattern that is the substratum of the entire universe. This energy pattern that is the substratum of the entire universe is the Rig Veda. So the Rig Veda, when first samyama is performed, produces the Sri Chakra. Now the Sri Chakra is shown in two-dimensional form on paper as a complex design of lines, intersecting lines. But it is depicted in 3 dimensions as well. And that is the energy pattern of the universe. Every manifested thing, every human body, every atom and every molecule, every horse and every tree has a Sri Chakra at its root. Like an invisible skeleton upon which everything resides. This Sri Chakra is the home of $432,000 devas, impulses of creative intelligence. And the Sri Chakra, no matter what size it is, always contains 432,000 devas. In Satyuga. In Kali Yuga, It's like a big office building in which many of the offices are dark. It's the darkness of the offices that are caused by individual karmic traces. Does Mount Meru have anything to do with Antarctica? No. Antarctica is basically a rim or a ridge of ice surrounding the oceans, kind of like the edge of a bowl. However, the North Pole, the Arctic, has a Mount Meru associated with it. This Mount Meru is etheric and cannot be seen physically, but it exists in the center of Bhumandala as the support or the axis of Bhumandala, which is the Earth plane where we exist. As we conduct sadhana to balance individual karmic traces, we are literally releasing from their imprisonment numerous devas in our Sri Chakra. And eventually, the primordial pattern of the universe, which is also called the divine karmic traces, shines forth and makes it possible for the individual to operate in accord with divine will. Prior to that time, one is only guessing. One is trying to do the right thing, following the rules written down in the scriptures, but it's impossible to spontaneously act in accord with the divine will, all the laws of nature. But once enough karmic traces have been balanced, the divine karmic traces expose themselves to the awareness, and then it's easy. Always, every action is in accord with the divine karmic traces. And the Sri Chakra is substantially purified. Now, the Sri Chakra exists on all different scales. There's a Sri Chakra within every cell of the body. There's a Sri Chakra within every molecule of every cell of the body. And each of these three chakras contains 132,000 spaces for devas. There's even a Sri Chakra within every atom. So there's no confining the Sri Chakra to a minimum size. Nor is there any confining of the Sri Chakra to a maximum size. The entire universe as a whole also has a Sri Chakra.